Hello there, Wesley. Welcome to the Ground Investigation Podcast, episode 8, straight from the Algarve in Portugal. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you for having me on.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. You got through all the stages of application, so more than welcome to have you on. So, as always, I usually ask people to sort of introduce themselves, really. I know you started off with Structural Soils, and then you've moved over to BAM Ritchies, but apart from that, I was going to give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, really, and your career to date.
Yeah, so, my name is Wesley Dixon. I initially started at Structural Soils as a graduate engineering geologist, basically straight from uni. Whilst I was there, basically worked my way up to a regular engineer. During that time, I found my niche, so to speak, was the logging side of it, soil and rock logging and report writing. Eventually working out to senior engineer whilst at Structural Soils. Then after 10 years, I've recently made the move to BAM Ritchies and been there for around about 4 months now as a senior ground engineer, doing more project and stuff.
And so you were at the company for quite a while, so 10 years. That is quite a long time, I think. I think most people change much earlier. Of course, all companies would wish that everyone was like you and stayed a minimum of 10 years, but that's generally not how it works. So, I mean, what is it about yourself that wants to stay at a company for such a duration?
I think when I first joined Structural Soils, I had it in my mind that I suppose I'll see how it goes and thought if I can last 2 years, that's probably a good sign. And funny enough, I think the 2 year period was the point at which I feel as though there was kind of a shift in my career, because that's when there was a large job won at Wolfer Power Station, which at the time was like the largest ground station in Europe. And it was just a coincidence that I happened to be in Asda at that point, and one of the senior engineers there, who was kind of running the job, said like, "Oh, we're going to Wolf in a couple of months. Like, we could do some graduates there." And I was like, "What could I go on?" And he kind of looked at me like, "Oh yeah, no, of course he can." So after that, I'd gone there, and I think that was just a big change, because that's kind of when I went from doing the 1 day window sample jobs and stuff like that, then going on a site where you had like 18 rotary rigs going down 200 meters, and really kind of thought, okay, this is not only like quite interesting, but just on such a much larger scale, I could like really appreciate a lot more what people do. And I think that job went on for the first phase for about 10 months, and I'm going back to Bristol just feeling as though I've just learned so much more now about engineering, geology, and the industry, and I feel as though it then just gave me the confidence to then do a lot more and put myself out there, not taking a big step back and like, I don't know what if I can't do this, or what if I'm not very good, and so well just give it a go, because in my mind I thought, I'll go to Wolfer, if I'm rubbish they'll send me back. But I went, gave it a go and thought, okay, no, that works out quite well, I should just apply the same logic to everything else.
Fair enough. So the basically the exposure of a much larger project kind of has helped you build up your confidence in the areas that you're working on as well then.
Definitely. I find with the it's not to say it's a bad thing, so to speak, because you do have to have a mix, but say mainly doing some of the smaller projects, you find it could be like right here, this day you're here, and the next day no, there's somewhere else, and you might not always get the feedback or follow up of like, well, what did you do correct on this one, what went badly on that one, whereas if you know that you're there for 10 months, you can actually see the change. And even looking back when I first, because I'd never really logged rock core before that, I thought I knew how to, and then when I got there I realised for the 2 years I'd actually been doing it quite badly, and I think, well, and because you're doing it day after day, you get better and better, and it just you're just able to focus a lot more rather than, right, I need to do this one job, but then I've got the next one, and it doesn't feel as rushed. You can actually take your time a bit more and improve the quality of the work that you're actually doing.
Yeah. I suppose once on the larger projects, you have everything set up much better. I think you might have a logging shed. There might be someone there to supervise and give advice all the time. You even get some experts coming in occasionally, giving you pointers, making sure it's all, it's all correct and it's all the same, really. So, and of course, logging off the floor from, a window sample is, has its, drawbacks essentially.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I feel as though going to Wilfer at such a early time in career when I've only been there about 2 years, it almost spoiled me a bit because there were about 10 of us logging like a massive warehouse. They had someone like photographing all the core for us. It would all kind of come out, and from there, I thought, I suppose like all the large shops going forward are like this, and you go to some where you kind of get there's a metal container, and you look around like, so yeah, where's the logging shed? And it's like, well, that's it. It's like, it's a container like with no lights, no bench or anything, and they look at you like, what more do you want? You're
who do you think you are? And a logging snob.
Yeah. But it's, I suppose, people are different because we working 12 days on, 2 days off for about 10 hours a day for 10 months. And you had some people like, oh, how could you do that? I would have gone insane. Whereas for me, it's like, well, I'd have probably gone insane just being on a site for that same period of time, like just supervising rigs and stuff in all different types of weather. Like, it snowed quite a bit when we were up there. Whereas, I think if you kind of go in, you've got the core there and you think, okay, like, we'd aim to do 10, 15 meters today. And, the core, it doesn't talk back to you. Sometimes drillers do. It's, I just really quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't talk back to you, does it? Rock core, but drillers sometimes can. Have you ever got into any issues with, well, not issues with drillers, but, sort of conflicts? And if so, how did you resolve it? I have done. I mean, you get the, usual ones where you, I don't know, like you'll say to them, are we going to drill, like 3 holes today to, I don't know, 4 meters something. And then it gets to like 11 o'clock, they kind of finish that and you kind of see something like, well, maybe we could probably do one more. It's like, no, you said, we were going to do this. You said 3, yeah. I'm
going to go home early. And I mean, it was, someone that gave me advice saying like, if you know that, you've got a driller that can do, like 4 or 5 holes in a day or something, always sometimes tell them like that we're going to do 1 extra so that if that doesn't happen, you can be like, I suppose you just knock that hole on the head and, you don't end up annoying them or make it seem like you can like work them right till the end of the day. But no, I'd say probably the worst, so to speak, was a driller who I don't think really liked graduate engineers. I think, he kind of saw it as, I've got some like, young, fresh-faced 22-year-old who barely has a beard, basically like telling me what to do, and just absolutely everything that I suggested, he was like having a go, swearing at me, saying, what are you even doing here? And I was like, well, I'm here to learn. This is like how it goes, and just basically being really difficult to work with. And I kind of thought, well, I know he wants a reaction out of me, and as soon as I give it to him, then he wins. So I was just like, do my best to keep calm. It's like, well, we're just trying to get a job here. Because all we were doing on that job was, what was it, decommissioning an install pipe. That's what we were doing, but it was just kind of going, it was all just kind of going wrong. And I just thought, well, no, I just need to like, remain calm, try and be professional about it. And then if he sees what I'm not getting to him, then he'll stop. And I think after a while, I just kind of got bored. I went out, got him some cake, which he then obviously thought was quite strange. And afterwards, it's sort of like a end of a movie. Actually, then opened up to me a bit and started saying how, he's been a driller for so long and he kind of lost his love for it, but he doesn't really know how to do anything else. And actually then admitted that he's now like taking it out on everyone else. It's like, see, therapy works.
Yeah.
So which
therapy does work.
Yeah. Bringing in cake to drillers is always a good one. But yeah, I say that's worst thing. It's never been anything too bad.
No, that's it. And Kate, so I've actually done a post on a similar thing and telling people, telling the drillers that they've got an extra hole to do, is a good one. Cake, sweet, general respect, but of course, general respect doesn't always work because natural human reaction. They want to kind of test you, I suppose, don't they? Some of the people you work with. But no. Okay, so you solved it with cake and a conversation then, as most things are in life, I think. So going back to sort of you've been soils for 10 years. Do you think people move on too quickly in their roles?
No, some of them do, and I found. I mean, obviously, like I'm at BAM Ritchies now. I've only been there a couple of months, so I suppose I've only got structural soils to use as the example. But I have noticed it in other companies where it seems as though some people are either there for 6 months or will stay for years and years. And I think part of the issue is, and especially found it when I'd met some of the graduates straight out of universities, they kind of get into it and straight away kind of think right, I want to be doing this, I want to be doing that. And if they get given jobs which, I don't know, some of them might think, oh no, this is a bit beneath me or it's a bit boring, think, well, no, this isn't for me, and then just kind of want to move somewhere else. So, I mean, I had, it was a graduate and we had to basically photograph a load of core, and he just really didn't want to do it. He couldn't see the point. And he was like, no, I want to be out on site supervising rigs. And it's like, I understand, but, core photography, that's still part of the job. It's, people are paying for these photos. And he was like, why don't you just get a bloody photographer to do it? Why do we have to do it and stuff? But then the thing is, I pointed out, is that he couldn't even take good photographs of the core. We had to redo a lot of them because he just didn't know what he was doing. I kind of said, well, you say you want to go out and supervise rigs and stuff, but if you can't even take photos of an inanimate object, then how are you going to, go out on site supervising multiple rigs? And it was fair point. So I think, like I said, I kind of have, I think the two-year rule, just try and stick out. And if after 2 years it's still I'm absolutely miserable here, then go and have a look. But like I said, at sort of my first 2 years, I wasn't always the happiest. I was always doubting myself and thinking, this is really what I want to be doing. So people definitely do, I find, move on too quickly.
Where does the self-doubt come from in relation to your skills?
I think it's potentially a generational thing, in that obviously at the time I was at secondary school. That would have been obviously 2006 would have left. So then you think, by the time I was at college, basically it was then almost mid-recession. So I kind of got to the point we kind of, I left college and was going to university. It was there's not really any jobs out there. If you have one, you should be really lucky to in. So in my mind, I kind of thought, right, that means, I need to go to uni, get really good grades, and thought, if I get a job, I need to go in just knowing absolutely everything. Otherwise, they're going to look and be like, well, you're rubbish, so we might as well get rid of you. So I think for the first couple of years, I went in thinking I just had to know the job inside out. And obviously it's ridiculous thinking about it now. It's well, no, of course you can't, you're new to the industry. So just how would you know that? So I feel as though I was just really critical of myself. Anything I didn't know, it's oh no, I should have known this. Why can't I do this properly? And I think a big reason I just never asked anyone, because I thought, I know I can't ask anyone because I look silly, so I try and figure it out for myself. Yeah. And I mean, to give an example of, I suppose, when going in, because I was so afraid to ask anyone about anything. When I first started at Structural Soils, and someone mentioned window sampling to me, I didn't know what it was, and rather than just asking, "Oh, what's window sampling?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." Yeah. And in my mind, I thought window sampling is that they would go with a massive rig, drill a hole, lower someone into the hole in a cabin with a window, and that they would look at the rock surrounding it. Yeah. And I don't know why I didn't just say, I was mentioning something. I was like, window sampling is the way you put someone in the ground. And what are you on about? So I just, I was making myself just look really silly, because I was too afraid.
Yeah.
I thought I just had to know everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's important for graduates to ask questions, but I do get what you mean in terms of the fear of asking questions, because you don't, kind of want to come over silly. But if you don't ask and you don't find out, then you definitely will at some point. But it's kind of a catch-22. But I suppose that must have drove you to find these things out. If you've, in terms of your skill level, etc. It must have drove you, because you were a bit worried about it, to work harder and make sure that you really, got your work done and found out about all these things as well.
Yeah, no, it does. It's definitely a balance, and again, like going back to whilst at Walford doing the core login. Again, I was I was a graduate there. You had I think the next person up must have had 7 years experience, and everyone else had loads more. So in my mind, I kind of thought, well, I'm I'm the least experienced person here. So I really need to pull my weight so I don't fall behind. So I basically asked and said, obviously, there's been other phases. Do you have the logs for what we had done? And they did. So in the evenings, basically going through, just reading through every single log, seeing what people had done, thinking, right, okay, these are really good examples. And focus on this to then try and improve as I go along. And that's what I did. And afterwards, just obviously as time went on, it's okay, these are pretty good. It's getting better. And I learned to then ask questions. There's never been a time when I've asked a question and then it's basically come back oh, that's silly. It's always helps to do it.
It does, definitely. And you mentioned there about sort of logging feedback. That's really important, isn't it? Because especially as a graduate, you could be on site logging trial pits or window sample holes or whatever it is, and then some of the times you don't get it back. So you'd rather have it back, red pens, so next time exactly what you should be doing, even if it's brutal. That's how you learn, really. If you don't get it back properly, it doesn't help.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I remember at Source, I was speaking to someone else who mentioned it, saying how I think, for years he would be doing stuff on site or logging soil or core and be doing it wrong. But because it would kind of go to someone else, they would check it and just correct it. They would never then say, oh, you're doing this incorrectly. Yeah. So you carry on, because you just wouldn't know otherwise.
No, that's exactly what I found. And I suppose they're very busy, aren't they? Some of the people that are going through, or then that's probably that's the only thing I can think of, really, because it does make sense. But if you have to then go back to 5 other graduates, you think, I've got a report to do, I've got everything else. So you've got so many things to do that you only have so much time in a day, I think. But it is important, I think, for the graduate to find out. So what, in terms of the ground investigation industry, was it your first choice when deciding a career?
To be honest, when I was in secondary school, well, actually, all the way up until college, I had it in my mind, concrete set, that my career choice would be music. That I was going to be a musician. I play the saxophone and drums, and since the age of 13, basically every Saturday, up until I was 17, went to a Saturday music school, which was from 8 till 8 till midday. So you do stuff like choir, playing bands, playing percussion bands. It was pretty good. So I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. I then got to college, did A-level music, and kind of had a revelation that turns out I'm not actually a very good musician, which is something I overlooked. And as I got there, you had people that were just amazing, and I kind of thought, I'm not even average. I'm generally not that good at music, the theory or anything. I was rubbish. And I just remember taking one of the music exams, and I actually got a U in one of the music exams. And I was thinking, it's probably something for me. And like speaking to career advisors, like saying, "Yeah, I want to be a musician." They're like, "Oh, do you know anyone in the music industry?" I was like, "Well, no," and they're like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Well, the music industry is one where networking and stuff is important." And I then thought, yeah, maybe I need a fallback plan. And the logic I used, again, it was because it was recession time. Is I thought, right, okay, can't do music. I need to do something where I'm always guaranteed work. And I kind of went with the route of, well, I'm doing geology as well at A level. If geology is studying the earth always has to be there. So there always has to be people looking into it. Therefore, I'm always guaranteed a job. And I thought, and just based on that, I thought, okay, I'll try and have a career in geology. And I understand it was the thought process that probably a 5-year-old would have, but it's still
it works. No, definitely. So do you still play the saxophone and drums now? Is something you enjoy?
My drum, my drum set is currently at my parents' house. The saxophone, it's up in the loft. I'm not. I think the last time I played it must have been quite a few years back at a Christmas concert. Like when I go back to Essex and see my parents have like a Christmas concert at the church that they go to. But it's just it's just the time now, like to. It's a hobby really now to play an instrument, and people don't really seem to have like time for hobbies anymore. And I think I enjoy doing it at the time, but there's no way I could have had a career out of it, and I'm definitely chose geology now over the music.
I think that so I play a little bit of guitar, and to just grab the guitar and start playing for 20-30 minutes is a great kind of release, take your mind off everything, kind of flow away somewhere else for 30 minutes. So it's great for that. I mean, I can't even play it that much, but I can do enough where I can just kind of, all the troubles kind of melt away for a good 20-30 minutes. And it's quite good for your mental health, I suppose, to pick up an instrument and play it.
Yeah, it really is. I kind of always think, looking back, that I did choose two sort of awkward instruments to play, because you've got the guitar, which can kind of like pick up and play, and say like piano or keyboard is quite good, but saxophone, you're not really going to go into someone's house or shopping centres casually. It's just going to be a saxophone there, so I think I might get up and start playing that. The same with a drum kit. There's you need a or a room in the house to play. You can't just have one in the living room playing whilst people are watching the TV. But I did enjoy doing it growing up, and it definitely helped with. Say for example, at the end of each term, we'd always have concerts. One would be in Romford at Queen Elizabeth Hall, and some of them would actually be at the Royal Albert Theatre. So you'd perform in front of quite a lot of people from a young age. Basically, just growing up in terms of public speaking and confidence with that, I just kind of don't really have too much of an issue with it, because I think if you're speaking to someone, you're kind of in control. But if you're playing an instrument in front of people, things can go wrong. So it's a lot more nerve-wracking.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. To gain some experience of playing in front of people, in front of an audience, can build your confidence, so you can get lots of other skills from it, not just playing the instrument. But that's a very valid point. So in terms of ground investigations, what's kind of been one of your most interesting projects to date? Was it the one that you were sort of trapped on it as a graduate with structural soils, or what's been the most interesting project?
Looking through, I'd say probably the most interesting project. It was probably the very first one. It was quite a small project in Southampton, but to me it was the most interesting, where I first discovered like unexploded ordnance, or UXO. Previously I'd been unaware of, and it was just as they were doing the talk saying like various places in the UK had been bombed, and how some of like them kind of like go down in the alluvium, but because it was quite soft, but not soft enough. They would kind of do a U and kind of come back up. And I, thought that was quite fascinating. And how he was saying, there's like some places in London where they know that there's bombs under the buildings, but they're like, it's actually easier and safer just to leave it where it is than to try and get it out and take it somewhere else. And I think that just completely opened up my mind that with ground investigations, like, it's not just looking at rocks. There's just so much which is involved with it, which people generally don't know about. So I think even though the job itself was just a couple of cable holes, it was the fact that it was the first introduction to UXO. That's always just sticks in my mind as like a job where it was like, that was something quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm the same. I was actually on a HS2 role as a contractor, and we had the same. So we had that UXL fellow who came in and ship was kind of had a like a booklet was going through the bombs, different uses for the bombs. Ones in which was kind of made to sort of flicker light as it landed a small one, and the kids would write all sorts of things, and you think, what the hell? But then, of course, we returned with our version of the same thing. You think, but no, it is quite interesting that sort of thing. I mean, we've had a few, when you're sort of doing trial pits on certain occasions, they do a risk assessment, don't they? And if it's I think it's a medium or above, perhaps. Then someone comes out with a deck chair and they have this wand that they wave about to see if they can pick anything up, which I've never been around when they actually have. But in terms of actual sort of ground investigation projects, apart from the UXO and learning about that, what's been some of the one of the best ones that you've been on in terms of perhaps your contribution to it?
I would say it was like a HS2 project as well, where was that back in? That was 2019 actually, so not that far, not that far back. But I was the login manager for it, and I think we were doing like about 200 holes there, and it's just when you look at the geological map of all the different units that they have. I don't think, like, of all the sections that we could have been given, like, this is just so complicated. But when we got there, it was, actually then quite interesting seeing all the different units that you get. Like, you had the Mercia Mudstone and Hellzone formation, and we had, I think it's called like the Wixley Halite member, where you are, actually drilling in. Drilling halite out of the ground, which I think no one had ever really seen. So, of course, we had to go through different things like, well, how do you rotary core salt, really? Because if you use regular flush, dissolve it away, what speed do you do it at? So, we were experimenting with different things like getting IBCs, pouring a load of salt into them, mixing it around. Of course, that didn't work because the salt just didn't dissolve because it wasn't a saline enough solution. So we then found, I think there was another company that would make like, I can't remember what the concentration had to be, but we had to drill with like saline solution flush in order to actually get the cores out of the ground.
I see what you're saying.
And that was quite an experience as well when you had like those people, like some people like proper geological experts, and for their first time just seeing halite like that getting out of the ground, and generally quite good recovery as well. And I don't know, it's probably unlikely for a while that there'll be another job where kind of get to see something like that.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, we've seen some bits of halite, but not in sort of drilling, what kind of depths were you going to? What kind of, recovery were you getting there?
It was, I think this was at about like 50, 60 meters down.
Yeah.
It was, it was pretty deep, and it's a case of once it then comes out, then it's a case of, how do you log halite? Do you still use unconventional, like BS terms that you have? Are there fractures in it? Because it kind of came out as kind of looking like basically discs of salt, and we were like, is this what it's like in the ground, or is it just what the drilling has done? Is it because it's been dissolved But it was, it was really, really interesting to see that.
Yeah. And you say, so what was your role there? So you were the kind of login supervisor there, were you?
Yes, yeah. So I was the login supervisor for that, and that was again for around about I think we were there for around about 12, 13 months in the end as well. So
and how many people did you have there logging the call then that you were in charge of?
That it was about three to 4 people logging the call. I think but obviously because there was quite a bit to do, but as with HS2, obviously when there's issues with access and stuff, you don't you not just do everything at once. Whereas so when you had the job like Wilfer, we were sometimes we would be getting 4 to 5 pallets of core per day. And that's not because that's just how much I drilled. That's just because we had someone whose job it was literally just to drive back and forth to site. And with where the logging shed was based on site, that's just the most amount of trips that they could do in a day.
Yeah.
So obviously there, it was constantly going. And, if someone was off, it's like, right, now how are we going to get back? And luckily HS2 was a bit more spaced out, with a bit more breathing room with the login.
Yeah. What would you say advice, I suppose, for some graduates sort of just starting to log rock in their career?
I'd say the first thing is obviously have someone. If you're going to start out, obviously it's good to have someone there with you, just to obviously kind of go through the do's and don'ts, and also to for the first thing have an example, a good example log, so that you can have something to follow. Because obviously, I guess it's all well and good having the BS and saying, okay, this is how you're meant to do it, but I think unless you've done a few, it's not always that simple to follow. And I find it's something that if you do want to do it, and I suppose kind of get good at it, I think you do need to do it quite a bit as well. It's a lot of repetition, and it can get dull at times, but it's just about being able to think, okay, I'm going to spend 8-10 hours a day just doing this, just concentrating on it, and just trying to do a really good job of it. The thing is, it's everything that you log and core, it can just be so different. So say, I've done lower Thames Cross and done loads and loads of chalk, and in my mind I thought, okay, that's fine. I've got chalk down. Probably won't be able to see anything new. And then had recently done a job where it was West Melbury chalk formation, which I'd never actually seen before. So to me, it was like, no, actually, I'm not too sure how exactly, what I'm meant to be looking for in this, with other formations. Think, okay, and at this step, you're meant to have, this certain flint or this shell, and then all of a sudden it was something which was brand new to me, and it almost kind of went back to, being a graduate where I'm still quite new. And I was like, right, okay, get out the, Rory Mortimer book, having a look at that, asking questions. So it's, you're never going to just know everything. It's not possible to do, but at least try and do what you can at the time.
Yeah, definitely. So did you buy yourself the Rory Mortimer book?
No, I've got a copy.
You have your own version.
So because I think it's just a case when you just really stuck, you can kind of have a look at that and then kind of go back. If you've got nothing else to work with, so at least you're not going into it completely blind.
I bought myself one as well, but it's definitely pricier, but I think I paid £100 or £110 for my one. But I suppose there's only one. Yeah, I think that and is it David Norbury's. yeah, definitely that and David Norbury's book. The two that you would need. Do you know of any other books at all that would help out kind of a graduate sort of getting into ground investigations?
one, I did have a copy, but I think you can get it online anyway from the website. But with structural saws, they've got like the engineer's reference guide, which is very helpful. And even though at the time when I started there, that book was readily available, it was kind of like I was given it. I was just like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Kind of like tossed it to one side. Was doing a load of stuff on site wrong, and to realise, if I just actually looked in it, so many mistakes and things I would have made. Like say, it not only has all the stuff about the beers and how to log and stuff, but even says if you're out and need to take certain samples, just like how much the lab is going to need, what type. If it's sand or gravel, you're going to need like this much. If it's clay, you only need that much. So it was when we were doing like a very small job where we were doing window sampling, and they said, "Oh, we need to test this, and we need to test particle density." And I didn't know what particle density was, so I was like, oh, "That's fine." Just gave them a bulk bag, and they were like, "Well, no, we need like an undisturbed sample for this." I was like, "Oh, right. Well, I guess we won't be doing any particle density testing." Whereas if I just looked in the book before going, I would have known that, and wouldn't have had a client kind of thinking, like, why did we get this guy on site that doesn't know, doesn't know what he's doing?
No, it's a good one to mention actually, because I had Eric on a couple of episodes ago. I think it was episode 6. So the engineer's handbook, which you're referring to, is actually in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go ahead and download that, they can do that, or of course they can go on the Structural Soils website. But I've used it a couple of times myself, and it is very handy, and it's quite a short, book as well. It's not like some of the actual specific logging bits are really thick, and even if you have it as a PDF, it's quite a large amount of data. But yeah, no, it's definitely it's a really good book to get and keep on your phone or something like that.
It really is. And well, going back to what you'd mentioned about, if you're getting people that are just starting out, and especially if they're, focusing on, say, like soil or core logging, I think the section in there which basically talks about the mechanical data, like total core recovery, solid core recovery, the image that they've got there showing all the different, like the length of core and what would count as, total core recovery solid. I think that's just been so useful, because there's been so many times on site, sometimes, with designers or clients, and they'll be looking at the log and say, well, this is, like non-intact and stuff. And it's like, well, no, if it's got, like a fracture just going down the middle, then that's not, non-intact. It's still kind of got the diameter there. And just that when I showed them the diagram, I was like, oh, right, yeah, okay. So that's, been very useful in basically trying to get your head around how you class the core.
No, it's a good book for illustration purposes for that. So in your current role, do you have a kind of a typical day? And if so, what's that kind of like? I'd imagine you're going to say no, because I don't think many people do in ground investigations.
No, I suppose at the moment, as currently BAM Ritchies doing more projects management stuff, I say usually the typical day is, say, around like 7:30 or 8 o'clock or early morning tends to be when I get like the most phone calls. So that's usually the point at which either information from the previous day comes through, or the point at which something has gone wrong. So I think on Thursday, I got a phone call at about 8 o'clock we had someone out doing water monitoring. Had to basically go somewhere where there was like a padlock. Of course, got there, didn't know the combination. It's like, oh, right, okay. So I had to find someone giving the combination, putting the combination in. Next problem, the lock's frozen solid. Of course, it was like -7. So we're then going through, well, okay, can we deal with this? Trying the WD-40. I said, you're going to have to knock on someone's house and ask them for boiling hot water, but you're going to have to put that on expenses, because it costs about a tenner to boil a kettle now. In the end, that didn't work, and obviously, in the end, we just couldn't. And then it's, I suppose, throughout the day, it's I suppose just dealing with any issues on site, like we've got to this depth with like refuse and all the holes collapsing, what do you reckon we should do? I'll then speak to like designers or clients, like, should we carry on with this one or start a new hole, do an install here? So I think it's a case of like prioritizing. And I think I have the mindset of if there's people on site that are currently waiting for something, that's always like the biggest priority, because like that's where the money is obviously being eaten up, and you need to get them going. And anything else, if it's like, I don't know, a 5-minute email, it's like, okay, that can wait, because that's not as time dependent. So it's basically having a list and prioritizing like most important to least important, and just trying to get obviously the most important things done throughout the day.
Prioritizing then. So you mentioned project management. What kind of makes a project go well?
I'd say it's usually determined by everything that's been done even before you've mobilized the site. So, that like doing the site walkover, pricing it, knowing or kind of expecting what the ground conditions are going to be like, planning who exactly is going to be there, and all the different potential things that kind of could go wrong going forward. And if that's not in place, then you just don't really have a chance. So I think the very first job that I had done for BAM Ritchies was a HS2 one, and to be honest, it went so well. It actually seemed as though I was barely doing anything at all, as though it kind of like itself, like, because we thought, like, we know we have to have an engineer on site. We know we have to have someone, log in the core. It ended up being someone who'd like logged loads of talk before, so that was pretty good. We had like a contact, and they say, okay, we'll have like daily updates of what it is that we need to do, and it just all just ran like clockwork, just because the planning had been put there beforehand as to who was doing what, when it was going to happen, like when to call certain people, because once you're on site and get going, it's very, very hard to then kind of get back and think, we planned for this, we've got a cable rig on site, but now it turns out we need a sonic rig, and that just massively throws a spanner in the works. And sometimes you can't always predict exactly what's gonna happen, but there's definitely a correlation between the more time you put into the actual planning of the works and how well and how profitable it actually ends up being.
Yeah, that's it. And profit is very important, because sometimes they have quite low margins, and when things go wrong, you can wipe out any potential profit, and even some can end up suffering a loss for it, which is not good, because you can't do too many of them, because there'll be no business left. So what would you say is the biggest sort of time and budget killer?
I would say it's the budget killer, probably be third-party costs involved, because I find it just tend to be underestimated. And I know obviously it's hard, especially now. You want to win the work, you don't want to go too low, but you don't want to go too high. But I find like anything to do with the third party costs, you just can just end up losing just so much money with that. And I suppose not really looking at the big picture. So say we had a couple of years back, there was another smaller job in North Wales. We needed an extra rig, so hired one in from JKS Boyle, say for like, I think it's like 200, 300 pounds a day. Of course, when we're finished with it, we're in North Wales, and to get a wagon to take it away, it would have cost £1,000. So it's like, okay, that's fine, we booked it. But then had someone say, well, no, we can't do that. £1,000 is too much. We'll try and find someone cheaper. So it's like, well, okay, that's fine. But then the problem is the time it took to find someone cheaper, we were still having to pay for that rig. And they did find someone cheaper, but by that point, I think 5 days had gone past. And it's like, well, it would have actually just been cheaper. Obviously, you'd have gone with like the first one for £1,000 rather than, one for £600, but then still having to pay for the rig the entire time. And it's just small things like that, which sometimes kind of go under the radar, which when you get back and look, and it's like, oh, like we hired this GPS for the entire job, but we've not used it for the past couple of months, but, it's still costing us £300 a week. Like we didn't think we would need as much labour as we did. We've had to get in more agency staff, but, that's now taken up a bigger portion of the job. It's, things that you don't realise you need. And it kind of goes back to the planning stage. All the additional parts, like I could bring this and we'll bring that in. That's a lot of the time where the money ends up actually going. And I'd say in terms of the time constraints, it tends to be the lab testing, and it's not the fault of the lab. It's just the fact that the lab testing is always the last stage of the project. So if the project's overrunning and the lab don't get the stuff that they need, or if the scheduling's late, then you're always going to be waiting on them at the end. And, whereas ideally, if you want to do it in dribs and drabs, sometimes, I've had situations where we get like 5 schedules all at once. Then the client can still be like, we need the results in 2 weeks. And it's like, well, it's just not going to happen. If that's been happening for multiple jobs across the country for the same lab, there's then always going to be a backlog.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of what you said a moment ago about the having the drilling rig there and not being the correct one, etc. It kind of reminds me when someone will come to ourselves for a new member of staff for their company, but they won't want to pay any recruitment fees, as no one obviously does. If you can save money, then you're going to save money, aren't you? But then, of course, so they don't want to do it. So it slows them down. They don't have what they need at that point. Everyone, becomes stressed. Some people leave because it's too much pressure, and then they'll come to us later on. Whereas if they kind of just did it at that point, we could have, provided them with someone, and all could have been well. But sometimes you kind of save a penny and it costs you £1 to do it, and it just doesn't make sense in the long run.
Yeah.
So in terms of technical logging skills, what would you say makes it a good soil and rock logger?
It's somewhat, well, I think first of all you have to go in with the attitude of kind of wanting to be there. Like you can't, I think you can't really rush it, and you can't really blag it, because at the end of the day, someone else is then going to check it and go and look and think, well, if what you've done is a load of rubbish, it's just a bit pointless. But I think the main things you have to be willing to learn and willing to listen, and kind of learn from mistakes, and just not really mind kind of doing the same thing over and over repetitively. I mean, when obviously starting at Soars, I remember there weren't that many people that say logged core or stuff, and at the time I just thought it's just really difficult. And I think people no, it's just that people generally don't find it that interesting to do, so they just kind of sometimes might avoid doing it if they can. But I think luckily I'm one of the few where I generally did actually find it quite interesting. So I thought, well, find it interesting, not that many people seem to want to do it, so I might as well just kind of carry on and just try and get as good as it as I can.
Yeah, sure. What do you think the normal mistakes are that people make, and how do you reckon they can sort of rectify them going forward for soil and rock logging?
I think the biggest mistake is I suppose it's not really focusing on the finer details, or kind of having the mindset of, oh, that doesn't really matter. When you think, well, no, it does. So say like going through, countless HS2 logs, I've noticed that I'd say 9 times out of 10, say if people are looking at sand, they'll say, oh, the sand is fine to coarse. Whereas in going through a lot of the PSDs, it's actually very rare that, you are going to get sand that is fine to coarse. A lot of time it's, say, fine to medium or just coarse. And, from an engineer's point of view, or especially like graduates, it's like, oh, well, what does that matter? It's like, well, no, it all, from a design point of view, all of that stuff does matter in the long run. Like You can't just kind of look and say, oh, well, I think it's, a sandy, gravelly clay, so I just put that down. It's like, no, you need to be detailed, because you think what's in the ground is the whole reason we're doing this. And if you're just kind of given like half-assed information, then they're not going to have all the information that they need from the design side, and it's just not gonna work. So that's the thing. I think kind of need to think of the bigger picture, and also think, why are we actually here, or what what exactly are we doing this ground investigation for?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, because it is too easy to say find a course. I've done it a few times myself.
Yeah,
but yeah. So do you think that in terms of logging training, and there are a few companies, and you can go down there for half a day, maybe a full day, to either learn to log some rock, or to learn to log soils. Do you think they do a good job? Because there's a few of them, and some. I mean, I've been on one actually that I can think of, and I felt that it focused too much on the technical side, not enough on the hands-on side.
Yes, I think it's something which is quite hard to do well. I'd say the best for me. The best example or lesson I had was at Structural Stores, and it was the soil logging course which Adam Lumber had given. And again, that kind of opened up my eyes as to how exactly we do it. And say, when it comes to stuff, as he said, you need to think of a soil as a number up to 100%. Some things like slightly gravelly, that's 35% or less, and how you can't have a very sandy, very gravelly clay, and thinking of it like that. So, right, okay, that kind of makes a bit more sense now. And whereas if it's a sandy, it's a bit different, like numbers like 20% rather than 35 to 65. Whereas at the same time, it's not to say anything against the person who was doing the course, but I went to a London clay logging course, and I actually left more confused than when I went in.
Really?
I don't know. I think it was just a lot to take in. I generally couldn't get my head around it. However, as soon as I then went to the site where we were logging, the London Clay, after I'd say a week or two, I was like, right, okay, no, this makes a bit more sense now, because it's definitely something where you learn much easier by doing rather than being told, because it's quite hard to apply that knowledge to it unless you kind of see it there and think, oh, right, okay, so that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's doing. You have to do. There's no shortcut. But then, of course, you do need to know technically as well, which you need to use both, don't you? You need to be on site, have enough experience, but you do need to refer back to the sort of technical manuals, etc. So I was.
It's like sorry.
No, carry on.
Sorry, it's like I said, one of the main things is, why you have to think, why is it you're logging it, and also how much information is needed. And I was just going to use an example of it. It wasn't a job I was on, but someone was telling me how, I think there was somewhere, and I think the client said, oh, we've got our own engineer that we can provide to basically log all this rock. And I was like, okay, that's fine, like, saves us a bit more time and money. And I think it's about 30 meters of limestone. We got the logs back, and the log literally was 30 meters just saying grey rock, no other information. And we thought, you get more information on the driller's log. But again, it's like, you think, well, why are they there? That's maybe if you're just doing like a quick install or something, that's fine. But I thought they obviously weren't told, right, we need to know, what's the strength, how many discontinuities are there, stuff like that. They probably thought, well, I suppose you just want to know the bare basics of it. So we just got 30 meters of grey rock.
That's fantastic. That's not a huge amount of information, but at least you knew it was grey, and at least you knew it was a rock. So, I assume you've helped train and mentor junior staff throughout your time, what kind of advice would you give to new engineers, new to ground investigations in general?
The advice would be, especially when you start out, I wouldn't say you do the terrible things first, but I think some of it will be quite, I don't know, sometimes maybe a bit overwhelming or quite hard. Like, you're probably going to be out on site a lot more than, working from home or in the office. But it's all, I think every job that you do, you will learn something different. And as long as you're willing to learn from, say, certain mistakes that you make, then no one's going to really have a go at you. And I just think back to, like when I was starting out, just all the various mistakes I'd make just from certain assumptions. So, say like when you take environmental samples, of course now, it's like the industry standard. You take the environmental sample, you put it in the cool box with an ice pack, send it straight to the lab, send them a chain of custody, and then you schedule it. Whereas, I didn't know that. I took the environmental samples, took it back to our stores, had them booked into the stores. And then about a week or two later, my supervisor was like, "Did you send those samples off?" I was like, "Well, no, because why to send all of them off if we don't know what we're going to schedule?" And it's like, no, you meant to send them straight there. And at the time I thought, I'm going to get so told off for this. But it was just like, I know, obviously you didn't know. But of course, after that, I never did it again. And then I learned from that. Whereas, of course, if I carried on doing that, then I probably would have got a bit annoyed for not listening. But that's the thing. There's just certain things which either you won't know, people will assume that you know, and you will make mistakes. It happens, but it's a case of just owning up to it, saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't do this or I didn't do that. What, how can I improve next time?" And then work on it. And no one can really get angry at you for that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what advice do you wish, what advice would you give yourself then if you were, just starting out in your career after you've learned, obviously, what you've learned to this time?
I think it would be that, ironically, the job isn't 100% everything that you've been taught at college and university. Obviously, that knowledge comes into it, but then there's a lot more which you just you'll either pick up or kind of learn from experience. So to give another example, again, when I first started out as a graduate, we were doing a job in Reading, and it was just machine dug pits with soakaways, and the instructions were, okay, you need to go into a park which has a lock on it. You need to go to Taylor Wimpey. They'll basically have a key, and the key for the lock. I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I've kind of gone there, got the key from Taylor Wimpey, turned up to the park, and it was a combination lock. And I was like, right, okay, phoned up Taylor Wimpey. I was like, what's the combination? And they didn't know. And they said, I'm the only person that would know. We can't get a hold of him. So I'm thinking, right, so I've got now a JCB driver, the technician to do the soakaways. We're standing around. It's only a day job. What am I going to do? Yeah. And as I started to panic a bit, and then it was actually this technician that was with me just said, well, this is just like a £10 lock that you can get from B&Q. I've got some of those in my bag, combination locks. He basically said, if I bolt cut this off, put the new lock on, put the combination in, and we let Taylor Wimpey know what the combination is, that they can then tell, whoever it is that's opening it up. So I'm that's when we can do that. And, you wouldn't get taught at university. And after I said to him, that's a good idea. How did you come up with that? And he was like, so it's not the first time I've done it.
Yeah.
It's, it just, that wouldn't have occurred to me, but it's, I suppose, just thinking of solutions to, situations like that on the spot, okay, what is acceptable to do? What isn't acceptable? How can we, rectify this? It's not all just, I read in a book that the angle of slope stability will be this, or factor of safety. That's part of it, but a big part is just is problem solving, and you do get better better at it as time goes on and you experience more and more. So it's a case of not beating yourself up about it right at the start if things just seem quite hard, because you just can't know everything. You just have to learn from it.
Did you try the combination 1966? Because that always seems to be a popular one chosen for those.
I think I tried 0001 then 0002, and then I thought it could be.
Take a while. yeah. I've got hammer in the bag. That'll do it. So, did you have a sort of a strong mentor throughout your career?
Yeah, no, definitely. Two strong ones. Both enough called Adam. Which one? So yeah, first Adam, but at Structural Soils, it was Adam Dingle. So he was my supervisor whilst I was at Wilfer. At the time when I was logging, he was running the logging sheds. And again, because I was still kind of new, I'd always had in my mind, if I do something wrong, it's going to just, get the riot act read at me. But that was never the case. It was like, okay, this is how you do it. It was always quite patient and stuff. And, which I wasn't expecting. I'd always quite liked that. And I think as a supervisor, I always quite respected the fact that even though he was, the one kind of running stuff, he never, told you to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. He would kind of come down with the core boxes. If no one was free, he would go to site himself and pick the core up. Some weekends when we'd be like, we need 3 pallets of this to get back to the lab, and he would just take it down himself. He was just, always willing to put himself out there if needs be. It wasn't kind of like, oh, well, I'm the one in charge. You do this, you do that. Nothing was ever beneath him, and I really, obviously, respected that. And obviously, a couple of years later, when I moved more to the technical reporting side, it was as another supervisor, Adam Lumber, who again, was always quite amazed by his his technical knowledge and his patience. He was always busy, always flat out, but always has time for you, to ask a question, even if it seems like a really stupid question. It's not like, no, I'm busy now, come back later. And I just think those qualities are really good to be a supervisor or mentor. You have to be otherwise people are going to be scared to ask you stuff, and it won't really work.
Yeah, no, I agree. You need to be patient, impatient in order to do it. So basically, all the Adams then, that's who's mentored yourself throughout your time so far. Yeah. Do you think it's important?
Because I think there was. Sorry.
That's fine.
I was going to say there was there was a period at Structural Soils when we did have 5 Adams working there. Just so funny enough, it's you want to speak to Adam, it's need to be a bit more specific, but
yeah. Well, that is a fair few. So there was a bit of a delay. It's only a short one, but it does make a little bit of a difference when we're asking questions, unfortunately. So in relation to, you had a mentor, you used a couple of people there as a mentor, Adam and Adam. Do you think it's important for people in general to have a mentor? Because not all companies kind of provide a mentor scheme, but I think if you like yourself and you can just go to someone, ask questions and kind of, make them your mentor as long as they're willing to do that.
Yeah, I think without that, or having a mentor or someone that you can go to, it is a struggle, and that's not just for graduates. It's for finding any level. Like you think now, I've been doing this 10 years. Obviously, I've moved to BAM Ritchies, and despite everything, moving there, it is still almost kind of like going back to being a graduate, because there's a lot of stuff that say Structural Soils did that BAM don't do. Also, a lot of stuff that BAM do which Structural Soils didn't do, like new systems that they use. Structural Soils use GIN, BAM use whole base. They also use BIM 360, which I've never used before, and it's all stuff where it's kind of like I just have no idea what's going on, and it's just so much to learn. And having someone that you can just ask, such as say for example in whole base, I was just asking, how do I output a log? And it's like, oh yeah, you just do it like this, then that's fine. Whereas if there was no one there that I knew I could actually go to and ask, I could spend just ages just trying to find out how to do that one simple task when there's other things going on. So yeah, it's, I think, just imperative to have that in any company. Otherwise, I think just so much time is wasted by people just trying to figure things out or assuming, and that's when, you know, small or large mistakes end up getting made.
Yeah, definitely. And plus frustration, especially in relation to software, you can figure it out eventually, but during that period, it can be quite frustrating. So having a shortcut, you know, to ask someone, having a mentor going through, it certainly makes all the difference. So as you've worked mostly is in geotechnical contractors. Now, have you ever considered going into a consultancy? Has that ever crossed your mind at all?
Yeah, no, it has. It has crossed my mind quite a few times. Of course, in fact, it was when I was at Soils and I first met Eric Down. I think he said he kind of did it the other way around.
Yeah.
Consultancy first, then contracting. Whereas obviously I was doing contracting for a bit, and I always kind of had the mindset of, well, if I ever need to go into consultancy, I feel as though I kind of need to know enough about obviously the contracting side to be able to do that. And I think you kind of mentioned as well, you can usually tell people that go straight into consultancy, because a lot of the time they will sometimes ask or expect stuff which is impossible. Just because the background knowledge isn't there. I just feel as though for now the contracting is just, I know the industry, and I don't really feel as though it's at a time where it's like, I do want a massive change. I quite like what I'm doing, and I find that sometimes from the consultancy side, especially on site. I think we had it was like a girl from Atkins there, and she was going round, and she said, like, one of the worst parts sometimes about being a consultant is that it can just be so boring on site. All you're doing is kind of like just sometimes just standing around watching people do stuff. Like, you can kind of get involved if you want, but sometimes it can just be a bit dull being here, just watching someone drill, watching someone drill. For now I feel happy in contracting.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, because whenever I've seen them on site, they're there to watch the rig, I suppose, similar to myself, and then I'm logging, but then they're watching me log. And it's it's a very long day, because it's a kind of 10 hours on site. So if you're not doing anything, that's quite a lot to cope with, I think, mentally. Because if you're not actually doing anything productive, then it's just a really, really long day, I think, that.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think, obviously, like a bit of a balance of sometimes being out on site and kind of being in the office, then to be out on site and just be standing around watching. Like I said, days can feel quite long, but then again, sometimes you do get some consultants that, I don't know, say like they're digging a pit, and some of them are just kind of like, I'll give it a go, and as well, which is always quite nuts. Willing to muck in.
Definitely. So if you could change one thing in ground investigations with a click of a finger, what would it be and why?
I think one of the biggest things is just the industry itself. Apart from people that are in the industry, no one else really seems to know what it's about. Like, like, say if you say to someone, I'm a police officer, it's like, that's fine, teacher, it's fine. But if you say, I'm a geotechnical engineer, you just met with a blank stare. And it's like, oh, I'm like a geologist. And like, oh, like Ross and Friends. And it's like, well, no, he's a paleontologist, but it's like, not quite like that. And then you just kind of go, I think when you get there, you think, right, do you want the long version or the short version? So it depends on how I feel. Maybe I just say geologist. And so that's interesting. Or we'll say, ground investigation engineer, and kind of go through it in So it's just more, I suppose, more awareness of what, for people outside, what the industry is. I think Hollywood need to make a couple more films about it, because that's usually how people, know what jobs are like. And it means you won't get people, coming up to you in the middle of Bristol city centre when you've got a window sample rig there, being like, "Oh, you're fracking?" It's like, what, in Bristol with Mercy and Mudstone? Like, definitely not with a rig like this. I mean, sometimes it can be quite funny, but there's just lack of awareness about the industry.
They usually ask if you're drilling for oil, don't they? That's usually the thing that people come up and ask us.
Founding diamonds. But to be honest, I suppose on a more serious note, it's I think because of that as well. Obviously, for people that are then paying for the ground investigations, sometimes just due to the lack of knowledge of it, that's probably why they look. And it's like, well, why am I paying so much for like a hole to be drilled in the ground and just want to skimp on it? It's like, you have a massive field. It's like, I only want like one hole and might not know exactly, what tests they need. And it was like a housing company, and they basically said, we need some holes done. And they went out and done machine dug trial pits. And they then called us the next day saying that they wanted an interpretive report from that with like bearing capacities. And it's like, but you're not going to get that from machine dug pits. And they just couldn't understand. It's like, wow, you've like dug a hole, you've seen what's in there. Like, why can't you give us this information? Yeah. So it's just more a better awareness would prevent things like that from happening.
Yeah, definitely. People valuing a ground investigation is important. Otherwise, they will skimp, and they either pay now or pay later, I think, and the costs can be far greater later on if things fall down and people get hurt and everything in between. So is there anything you would have done differently throughout your career now that you have more experience, would you say?
I think quite a few things for a start would have asked, I think, a lot more questions.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, I wouldn't have been like, I don't know, really scared to have done things badly. And I would have, I suppose, tried to listen a lot more, not think, okay, it's just me trying to do this by myself to prove myself. Would have like tried to take people's advice, and also just not, being so hard on myself for getting things wrong, because I think people really do. But I mean, despite that, I'd say for the most part, that time at Structural Stores and at BAM, it has been quite good. Like there's no major regrets, and I do feel quite lucky in how things have turned out. In that, obviously at the time, I ended up joining it was like the major projects team, kind of checking reports and logs. At the time, I ended up joining that team. It was, I think, 2019. I'd been working away more or less constantly for about 8 years at that point. And it was my partner, she basically brought up saying, look, we're due to get married in a month. And we've never actually spent more than about, say, 4 or 5 weeks together before you've actually had to work away. And I thought, actually, that's a very good point. Like, we don't know whether we can, really live together. And I was thinking, probably would be good if at this point I could, maybe get a role still involved with all the major project stuff, because I quite enjoyed that, but maybe not as site-based. And I'd say probably the next day we then had an email come round had a number actually saying, we're thinking of getting together like a major projects team. We kind of need someone to do a lot of reporting. Anyone interested? And it's like, this is ideal. It's perfect. And I've done that for like 2-3 years, and again that came round at just the right time. It's I do generally feel quite lucky with how things have worked out.
Sure. Okay. What would you say excites you about the ground investigation industry for the future?
It's I think it's that it seems as though, despite everything that's currently going on, there always seems to be work. There always seems to be new projects. I mean, we've got like, let's say, recession looming and cost of living crisis, yet like asking around. I mean, especially at BAM, it's probably like the busiest that it's ever been there. Like, there's still matter. There's still a lot of stuff in the pipeline. And I think it's that kind of, despite that, people even obviously I talked before about the somewhat lack of awareness within the industry. People still do realise, like, well, we still need ground investigation as an industry to go. I mean, with recessions, that tends to be how people get out of them. Just be building, construction, and you can't really do that without the ground investigation to be there in the first place. So it's that as an industry, it still kind of seems to just always carry on, regardless of what's going on. And I suppose in a roundabout way, with my initial 5-year-old logic of the Earth's always going to be there, people always have to look in, has worked out in the end anyway.
No, it has. No, it is comforting, and it's good for us as a business as well, because obviously the ground investigation industry is still very busy. There are some people that their particular niches perhaps are not so much, but most of it is from our side as well. People are still coming to us. They're looking for everyone really, from engineers, drillers, project managers, etc. So, and that's been relentless, really, and it's definitely going to be relentless all next year as well, as far as I can see. Which we can't tell the future, but there seems to be budgets being signed off. There seems to be, and historically they do tend to build way out of recessions, don't they? So, it's not the worst industry to be in those terms either.
No, definitely not.
What kind of software have you used to help you do your job well throughout your career?
So it's been, to mention, structural stores. We used, GINTs, which it was quite helpful. That's the login software. And then we had, obviously, moving from paper logs onto tablets. And that was using like Flowfinity for that, and that in itself was pretty good. In that, obviously, you can log a thing on the tablet. It then goes up to the cloud. Someone else in the office can then get that information right away and put it in. And there's it has been such a change, since I started. And it was just paper logs, and sometimes you would go out, log something, and say you have like a deep hole. It's like page 1 of 5, 2 of 5. Then you realise you can't find like page 5 of 5. It's like, what am I going to do now? Do I just try and remember the last 5 meters, or go back and try and relog it? Whereas on a tablet, you've done it, saved it. It's just always the information's always there. Obviously at BAM, started using like BIM 360 Flow, just a whole heap of technology, which I think find a lot of the larger companies, like HS2 and stuff, I'm really interested in using.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you say the difference between GINT and Holebase is? Do they do the same thing? Because I've had some exposure to Holebase, never to GINT. What is that?
I'd say they pretty much do the same thing. I'd say, from my experience, I'd say Holebase is probably more user friendly if you've never really used that sort of like login software before. Well, I'd say GINT is much harder to master. Sorry, but then seems to have a lot more utility to it.
Okay, so it's trickier to master, but it can do more things. So for someone like myself who's technologically inept, then Holebase would be the one for me. So what sort of kind of software have you seen that you can see that's getting a lot better and it's just going to make things so much easier? Apart from the login software, because I have used the tablet actually when it was with BAM Ritchies beforehand, and it was quite an easy system to use, and the fact that you could just sort of push the button and the log disappear, including pictures associated with the day's activities, is pretty useful if you could get an internet connection at the time, which was not always the case.
I think one of the areas which I think is really improving and changing. It's, I suppose, not the like engineers are core logging, but the downhole geophysics side of things. So obviously at World, that was the first time I'd experienced the televiewers, like the optical images, because we had to log the core based on the images to know if we were out by more than about 0.5 meters. And with the job recently that we've done, it was borehole magnetic resonance imaging, which was, I think, we've kind of done it as an alternative to packer testing. But the thing is, it's basically, I suppose, in terms of usability, just much easier, kind of like lowering a probe into the ground, as opposed to the packer testing, which is having loads of different equipment, the nitrogen gas, getting that all set up, inflating the packers, potentially getting them stuck down the hole, and just knowing that, well, there's something else that can potentially do a similar thing for like so much easier is, for people all round quite positive.
Definitely. So, moving on from the ground investigation side of this podcast or discussion of ourselves. So I noticed you've had some traveling experience with your family as you're sort of growing up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yeah. So, with both my parents, they were originally from Jamaica. Dad moved over to the UK when he was 7, Mum when she was 14.
Okay.
I think with that, they just both seem to like to travel. So, with my dad, he owns something called like a Bristol car, which is similar to a Rolls Royce. And if you have a Bristol car, you then become part of something called the Bristol Owners Club. And basically every year, they'll basically just choose a new country to go to and basically try and travel around that country in the car.
Okay.
It's one of those things where growing up, I just kind of took it for granted that, we're going to Australia for 6 weeks in the car, like the car was shipped over.
Yeah, just normal stuff now.
And there's, but there's, a lot of things kind of going on, like be driving past, there's, like Ayers Rock or something like that, and I'll just be playing Pokemon on my Game Boy, just like, that's fine, just wasn't really too bothered. And so looking back now, like, there's just so much like more I could have got from these trips, but to me it was just like, another family holiday. And the thing, we did do a lot of travelling. I mean, when I was 4, actually, I think the first holiday I remember was going to Barbados. With that, it was with my mum, just entered a competition entered a competition, and they said, the prize is a family holiday to Barbados, which again was just like quite amazing. Yet I was 4, and with my memories of the trip, all seemed to be like really bad memories. I just remember on the first day getting there, seeing the beach, thinking, I'm going to go for a swim, and there was a surfboard which had basically been broken in two on the beach, and I remember a kid came up to me and said, you see that surfboard? A shark did that, it bit it. So straight away I was like, well, I'm not going in the sea then. The next night, having dinner outside, looked in the distance, could see a thunderstorm. Of course, I was 4 years old, it scared me. I had to then go into the hotel room with my mum, eating dinner, sister ended up eating like butter raw, ended up being like sick everywhere. And was in a kids club. I was like in the pool there, lying on a lilo in the shallow end. Didn't realise that the lilo had drifted to the deep end, got off the lilo, and almost drowned. A guy had to come in and save me. So it was obviously a really good holiday. Ended up going at one point, going with my brother in like long grass somewhere, going on an adventure. I think he was behind me, I was in front, and after a couple of minutes turned round, he was gone. So I was then lost for about 10 minutes in Barbados, just like crying, not knowing what was going on. And it's funny, that was the very first holiday I went on when I was 4. But they got a bit better after that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you need to running off and exploring when you're in places like that is definitely a little bit different from when you're in the UK, because there's things hiding in the grass as well that can jump out and bite you, etc. Spiders and all sorts of things. But so you kind of travelled around the place in a Bristol car then. So, I mean, that was quite unique, but I suppose you were so young, you wouldn't have really registered.
Me, my younger sister and older brother basically been stuck in a car for, sometimes like 4 hours a day. So of course it'll just constantly be arguing like, oh, he's looking out my window, he's doing this, he's breathing fire and stuff. And then I always have memories like when my dad would be if he's driving, whenever he adjusts the interior mirror so he can see you, that's kind of when we go quiet, because that's when you know that he means business. It's like, okay.
That's so true.
Quiet, but I think they were really fun holidays, but in the end, I think we ended up doing them because we all just physically got too big to all fit in the back of a car together.
No, that definitely had something to do with it. Well, I think we've come to the end of the episode. It's been a fascinating episode, learning about your career, yourself, your holidays, and and everything else in between. So thanks very much for sparing the time and coming on and sharing all your information with the audience.
I've quite enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, Wesley.